Can you hear me now? There we go. All right. We're starting a couple minutes late. This is the February Rocky Mountain Railroad Club meeting for 2022. I am Dave Schaff. I'm the vice president of this organization. Our new president, Andy Dell, was planning to be here tonight, but he had to go deal with a medical emergency with a friend of his. So I will endeavor to persevere, I guess. I learned that in a movie. Is there anybody here that has not been here before? We'd just like you to stand up and say hi and glad you're here. Anyone? Maybe you could, Nathan, you could give it to this lady over here. I don't think she's been to one of our meetings before. Yes, and she'll be thoroughly embarrassed, I'm sure. Well, maybe Brad can introduce her.
I've never been either. Is this on? Yeah. Is this on? Okay. Brad Swartzwelter and my wife, Barbara.
Hello, guten Tag.
By the way, her mask is actually an Austrian flag. And Austria is one of the very few places in the world that has rail lines that compare to our own Moffat line in terms of pure scenic beauty and tunnel engineering. So we're very proud of that flag because of its railroading.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Testing. There we go. Oh, maybe for this fella.
Hi, my name is Alec Hagan. I'm with Colorel. I sit on the board. I know many of you are members, so I was invited here by Mr. Bob Brewster himself, and I'm happy to be here. So thank you for this on.
Glad you're here. Okay, we also usually do current event updates. If somebody knows something earth-shaking that applies to, you know, regional railroads and stuff. Chip Sherman usually does this, but I think he's somewhere in western Kansas today. So I guess if I think of something newsworthy, I'll tell you. Otherwise, if nobody has anything newsworthy, anything new that we should know since the last time we've seen you, I missed it last month, but well, you get to talk in a minute. Yeah, you'll get the whole floor. Actually, right now is probably a good time. I can introduce Brad Swartzwelter because he's going to present our program, and I don't have a whole lot more things to say. So come on up, Brad.
Thank you, Dave. As far as current events, I was just going to let everybody know that Amtrak's California Zephyr and also the Southwest Chief have been reduced to 5 days a week because of a chronic labor shortage, which is, of course, as part of that labor force, I consider it a wage shortage, but that's a different story. But the point is that on I believe it's Monday and Tuesday, Denver does not have train service on a long distance route. And the pandemic is the primary blame for that. But I guess I'll just get started, Dave.
If you guys would turn off your sound on your cell phone so it doesn't interrupt the show. Put your phasers on stun or something like that. So thank you.
You didn't tell me they had weapons. Okay, so I guess I'll start. Let me start, guys. Let me start by first of all saying that I'm here as a train fan and not as a representative of Amtrak, not as a spokesperson for example, Winter Park Resort or any of the other organizations that I happen to do business with. I am just one of you guys, just a train fan, and please take it that way. But I'm going to start by reading some prepared remarks, just because I like the colorfulness of the English language. The love of trains is a global pandemic. It exists in every corner of the planet. It infects the core of a person's soul. It exists in millions of hearts. It exists in the most powerful halls of government at well-funded museums, and it's laid out in basements everywhere. Those infected are in organized groups like the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club and in 100 other ways. This pandemic is absolutely massive. It's impossible to know what sparks this love affair between certain people and the flanged-wheeled world. What we do know is that once a soul is infected, they are hooked for life. I know, because I have been. The symptoms of the Railfan syndrome can be as light as a mild fascination, similar to a common cold, or a life-consuming obsession, like full-body cancer, or anything in between, and there is no cure. I'm glad you like this. There is no immunization. There is no immunization, and there is no use in a person trying to deny it once they are ill. The best thing for those of us who are impacted to do is to make peace with it and enjoy it as our hearts so choose. Because in the end, this is one pandemic that is colorful, powerful, vibrant, and loaded with action. The Railfan syndrome is beautiful. I am infected. This is my story of life as a Railfan. I have a severe case of it, and I have since my earliest days. It is, short of my faith as a Christian and my love for my family, the dominant aspect of this life that I'm blessed with. So I'm going to start at the very beginning. And the very beginning of my Railfan life was in 1965 when I had my very first train journey. It didn't go. Aha. And the story goes like this. I was 18 months old. My mother was the mother of myself, my 30-month-old sister, and my 3-year-old sister. And her grandfather died in a little town called Richland, Iowa, close to Ottumwa. And she had to get back for the funeral. But my father, who was just beginning his practice after serving at Lowry Air Base, could not get the time away from work. And so my mother took us. She ran down to Union Station. They sold her a ticket, but the California Zephyr was sold out. So they said she could ride in the club car at the very back of the train. And so I and my diapers and my sisters and my mother spent all night long rumbling across Nebraska and into Iowa in the back of the California Zephyr on the floor of the Silver Sky, which is not a bad way to begin life. This picture is courtesy of Mr. Zimmerman, who wrote a fantastic book on the Burlington Zephyrs. Shortly after that, my father, who was an avid fly fisherman, was able to secure a fishing lease with one of the ranchers along the Colorado River named John Sheriff and his wife, Ida. And they got that in 1968. So starting in 1968, I was going up nearly every weekend throughout the fishing season, which is the primary season in Colorado, followed shortly by the Broncos. And we would go up there, and it was, unbeknownst to me at the time, right along milepost 84 on the Moffett subdivision of the Rio Grande Railroad, now part of the Union Pacific. I would go fishing with my father, and I would see the Zephyr, and I would see the Jeeps, and I would see the SD40 T-2s. I would see all of it going by. That was a powerful memory. And by the time this kept going on, it was hard to not be hooked. So, of course, I started model railroading. And I only tried once. As you can see, it's a little messy. See if I can find the button to make the point. Yes, you see the Elmer's glue? I was doing my best. It was a failed effort, but it was a lot of fun. but that's what life was like for me as an early teen. Before long, I was able to get myself a 1972 fastback Mustang, and that gave me the freedom to start chasing trains. Took this picture here in 1981, looking up Blue Mountain Road of the Rio Grande Zephyr, one of the most beautiful trains to ever ply the rails in North America. And little did I know at that time, but Barbara and I would make our home right up about there, which is where we live now, looking down on the Big Ten curves. It wasn't until 1979 that I was finally able to take a real train journey. And that was with my grandfather. And we jumped on the Rio Grande Zephyr at Union Station and went to Glenwood Springs. It would be the last train ride I'd ever get with my grandfather. And it was a stunning trip. I had no idea when we left that there were tracks beyond milepost 84 and the Sheriff's Ranch. And suddenly the whole world of Gore Canyon opened up, and Red Canyon. I had never ridden a train through Glenwood Canyon to see the Highway 6 from the other side. At that time, I-70 still wasn't finished. Shortly after that, my father and I took a plane ride out to Salt Lake City, and we got a ride on the Rio Grande Zephyr in 1983. That would be the last trip we took. I actually think this is a bright summertime picture, so that might have been the year before. But that would be the last time my dad and I would ride on public dome cars. We did get a chance to ride in Phil Anschutz's California Dome together once. So that was a great, great thing. As you can see, by the time I was hitting my early 20s, there was no turning back. I was absolutely hooked. Trains were what I was going to be about. However, it did lead to problems. For some reason, my buddies and I thought my train fascination was ridiculous until I told them that it was possible to jump on a freight train and just go where it went. And so we did that. And I did it multiple times. But one time we were coming through Bond and the train stopped and the police were waiting for us. And they escorted us off. And we got to, my friend and I got to spend a night at the Eagle County Jail. The next morning, they hiked us over to the judge, and the judge said, "You got to be kidding. You jumped on a freight train?" I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Why'd you do it?" And I said, "Well, because it's that cool. It's that fun." He says, "I always wanted to do that." It was good. I said, "Yeah, it was a great experience right up until the point when, you know, they put the handcuffs on." And the judge said, "I always wanted to do that." Okay, $50 fine, get out of here. And that was the cost. Unfortunately, there was a more serious problem with being obsessed with trains. I was driving down Highway 93 in early 1991. And there's a bar there called the Rocky Flats Bar. And if a car is going towards Boulder at 55 miles an hour and decides that they want to stop and have a drink at that bar, they slam onto the brakes to turn left and come to a complete dead stop because oncoming traffic doesn't let them cross over. I was 4 cars back. I didn't realize that was happening until it was too late, and had an accident with that. I would have noticed it had I not been watching the stupid freight train going through tunnel 2 and 3 up on the side of the hill. And what I found since then is that a great number of rail fans have had accidents driving cars trying to look at trains while they should be watching the road. So, important safety tip: let your wife drive. Because of that accident, we did some real soul searching. I was married by that time, and decided that it was time to go to college and stop doing the landscaping and other things that I was doing and pursue a career in railroading rather than just be obsessed with it. So I went to Metropolitan State College of Denver to get a degree in travel administration and tourism. And fortunately, I was able to secure an internship on the ski train with Phil Anschutz. And I worked for Craig Mize and Jim Bain. While I was at Metropolitan State College, I was able to strike up friendships with several people here in the room. My bus driver that would take me back and forth to Boulder was this ridiculous fellow who always had trouble with the brake pedal named Bob. Brewster, if you want to say hello. Also met up with a dear friend and lifelong friend, Hugh Wilson, who was also doing some studying there at Metropolitan State College at that time. The things that I learned on the winter part on the ski train, the Rio Grande ski train operated by Anschutz, would play a pivotal role in my life later on. After I finished with college, it was time to get a real job. And the only place in the railroad that I could find any kind of a job was in Gillette, Wyoming, running coal trains. At the time, the coal industry was exploding. And they hired me on as a brakeman, and I thought I was in seventh heaven for about a week. After a week, you realize that in Gillette, Wyoming, you are in one of the coldest, windiest, darkest, boringest places on the planet. And you just chose a life where you sit on the nose of a roaring locomotive holding 118 train cars loaded with coal, doing 8 miles an hour up Logan Hill for 4 hours. That was soul crushing. And friends, I'm here to tell you, I love trains, but that was just about enough to do me in. But I didn't quit. Instead, I got laid off, and that led to taking a job with the BN in Seattle, Washington, where they needed a few brakemen to help in the yard. And as soon as I was there, I was able to talk to the guys who were running Amtrak, and they were good enough to hire me on because they were starting a brand new passenger rail corridor called the Cascades Corridor, and they needed a bunch of people. So I was able to get on with them. For just a couple of years, I was a full-fledged conductor working off the extra board. And as luck would have it, I was called to be the conductor of the very first F-59, pulling the very first tilt into the curves state-owned Talgo train on the Cascades Corridor. This is a photo that was taken by the Washington State Department of Transportation. That's me there before I had a comb over. I actually had straight hair then. This fella right here, Dave Estes, went on to become the Secretary Treasurer of the National BLETE, the Locomotive Engineers Union. He was our engineer that day. This guy here ended up being the head of all hospitality on the Cascades Corridor. And this guy here ended up being a bartender and never liked me. It was a wonderful time in Seattle, but it didn't last forever. There were a couple of very prominent events that happened while I was there. I started in 1996, stayed until 2008. Right in the middle of that time, I was the conductor working the trains that would go up to Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada from Seattle. And one day we went to work, and right before we were to leave town, the boss, Kurt Laird, came up and said, "You're not leaving." We said, "Why not?" He said, "Somebody flew an airplane into some buildings." By noon, the president of the United States had called up the president of Amtrak and said, "Get a train up to Vancouver. We've got a bunch of people that we've got to get back into the country." Their airplanes were flying from Asia and were not allowed to enter American airspace. So they all landed in Vancouver, and we took a Cascades train up to Vancouver, and we got them and we brought them back. Some of the people in that train that day were cabinet level officials in the United States government. This is part of my bulletins that I received that day. And so that was a fairly prominent day on the railroad. We were the only form of mass transportation that left the United States after the attack was over and came back into the United States that same day. Then we came to Colorado. My mother called up and said my dad was a little bit ill. And at the time we were going through some transition in our family anyway with my wife's work. And so we decided to make a life back here in Colorado. Left Seattle, came on back, and I started working on the California Zephyr right up until there was no dirt under the tracks. And one day we were sitting in Grand Junction, and my locomotive engineer that day, Frank Wilson, Hugh's brother, came over to my room and said, Brad, we're not going on the train. So what are you talking about? We're not going on. He said, nope, the tracks are gone. We got to go to Wyoming. So we went up to Wyoming. We took the California Zephyr and we were going to come down to Denver, but they said, no, you're not going to Denver. There's no bridge at Greeley. Well, not actually Greeley, but the Platte River had washed out the tracks. So we couldn't go down the Greeley sub. So we actually took the first passenger train into the Cheyenne Depot in the first public passenger train in a couple of decades. And that was in 2013 during those massive floods. As soon as I was able to get back to Denver, the storm ended. I went for a hike to see how bad it really was because we just assumed the railroad were being a bunch of weenies. And if they had any guts, they'd run a train. That's a kind of a cool spot. If you go there now, the whole thing is filled up with granite that was trucked down from the big quarry on Highway 6, just before the junction with Interstate 70. We called it Lost Bogey Gulch because at the bottom of that ravine, the river had washed, the flood had washed away so much debris that we found an old friction-bearing bogey down at the bottom. And I have to wonder, and I have never been able to find any historical records of an accident there between Tunnel 2 and 3. But somebody at some point had a bad day. A couple of things that have happened that have been of prominence during my career here in Denver. And of course, getting to work on the California Zephyr is an absolute pleasure. And the legacy that was begun by the very first crew California Zephyr carries on today, even though we're a government-funded guaranteed monopoly now rather than a private company. We still take great pride in being able to provide California Zephyr service to the people of the world. And we take great pride in the beautiful restoration of the Union Station area that was completed in 2015. And so we took a similar picture of our crew that day on that new train coming into the new depot. And this is the crew that ran the first train into Union Station. This here is Larry Owen. He's currently the locomotive engineer on the Winter Park Express. There's yours truly. That's Jim Brzezinski, one of the top executives at Chicago. Who else is there? Well, that there is a lady named Maggie who's married to locomotive engineer Frank Wilson, who's brother of Hugh Wilson, who has nothing else prominent to say about him. But a lot of wonderful people in that picture. A lot of folks have already retired. A lot of them have moved on. It seems like it was just yesterday, but about half the people in that picture have already retired and moved on to other aspect in life. On that day, I'm pushing the button. On that day, we did have a private car, the Virginia City, on the tail. And so I got to be lucky enough to be the first conductor on the first train shoving back onto track Union Station. Those same rails will be there long after I've retired. And then in 2015, some guy named Bob Brewster had this idea of restarting ski train service that had died in 2009. And I thought it was a pretty good idea. So together with a great number of rail fans, many of whom are in this room right now, we put together a plan, we put together an idea, and believe it or not, it actually happened. We were able to pull it off thanks to a tremendous amount of effort from a lot of people. And I take great pride in being able to tell you that that train, the Winter Park Express ski train, is profitable on its own with zero subsidy from any entity. And that's because the people of Denver support it. They love it. They're willing to pay the money it takes to ride it. And one of the things that's really funny is that we have a lounge car service. And typically on the California Zephyr, about 1 in 10 credit cards will come up denied, missing funds or just worn out. That's the basic public clientele. And then people shuffle around, they find another one. We have had one card denied once in 5 years. That's what the people of Denver that go skiing are like. They're reliable folks. And that's part of the reason why we've had such great success on the Winter Park Express. And another big part of the reason why we've had such unbelievable success is because our Superliner bag coach is absolutely perfectly designed for a ski train. It's as if somebody said, let's build a ski train. How would we build a coach car? And that's what this is. It's big enough for a trainman to stand up in. It's big enough to handle all of the skis for 2 complete coach cars full of people. I've stuffed 3 in myself. It's safe and it's absolutely as convenient as could be. Nobody has a better ski train in the world when it comes to the equipment that's used. Nobody in Switzerland, nobody in Austria, and nobody in Japan. Our ski train is the most perfectly outfitted for ski train service there is in the world. And that platform that the young lady is standing on is heated. There's never any ice. We have been operating that train since 2017 on a regular basis. We have operated that train and served more than 60,000 customers. And so far, we have recorded 0 injuries, not one. We've had 2 complaints. One was because the train had to be canceled once because the Union Pacific string lined a train right at the big curve before Pine Cliff. A little bit of distributed power miscommunication. And the second complaint was because the guy on the PA just wouldn't shut up. This is the very first crew that ran that very first Winter Park Express. And that was a great and glorious day in the history of railroading in Denver. And a lot of people were absolutely prominent, but I do want to point out a few of them. First, and without any doubt, the most important executive was Joy Smith, who took the idea that we proposed to her, and then she took it to the very top, and she pushed for it with all her might, and that helped get it done. Another person that was absolutely vital is Gary DeFrange. He is the CEO of the Winter Park Ski Resort at that time, and he laid into it not just with vigor and excitement. He brought dollars to the table, like $1.5 million. And that was what convinced the state of Colorado's Department of Transportation to throw in $1.5 million. The city of Denver threw in 100,000. The city of Winter Park threw in 100,000. The Colorail group threw in some substantial money. And that's how we were able to build that heated platform. And we also had to have heated switches and heated derails at the Fraser siding in order to do the operation of getting the locomotives reversed every trip when the train was sitting at Fraser waiting for the skiers to get done with their day of skiing. And then another person is Harry Safstrom here. Harry has been absolutely instrumental in maintaining the volunteer program that helps us give the kind of service that customers need, but most important, to make sure that everybody stays safe on the train. Without him, I don't think we'd have a ski train. And then, of course, you've got to have a brain trust. And I don't know if I feel comfortable saying that Bob Brewster is the brain trust, but I think he deserves it on this issue without any question, because he stepped up. He said, I've got an idea, and he wasn't afraid to publish it. And that's all you need sometimes. Sometimes you just need a spark. So the ski train is here because of Bob. Yeah, absolutely. I did do a few other things in my railroad career besides just take great train rides through the Rockies. One of them is do a lot of reading. I saw this picture in a book that many of you may have read. It's by Bollinger, Ed Bollinger, and it's called Rails That Climb. And that picture is a picture of David Moffett himself. And this cup here was given to him by the people of Denver who contributed greatly. And basically, in 1904, everybody in Denver knew that it was vital that Denver had a railway that runs straight through town east-west, rather than just be a branch line north-south. At the time, Pueblo was very possibly going to become the dominant city in the state. They had an east-west railway. Denver did not. The people of Denver knew that Moffett was going to pour his entire wealth into creating that line straight west, what we call the Moffett Road today. They knew that that would save the city and turn it into a prominent capital rather than a meaningless place like Pierre, South Dakota. Nobody goes there. Nobody would be going to Denver if we didn't have that railway that turned us into a great city at the time. They knew it. They wanted to show their appreciation. They could not help financially get Moffett through the Rockies. He had to do that on his own. He was the only one with the wealth to pull it off. But they could say thank you. And so they forged this magnificent cup out of pure silver with Venetian marble at the base. And they had it engraved with some of the most striking engravings I've ever seen on any kind of metalwork. And they presented it to him in December of 1904. And I had never seen it. And I had loved trains and I had loved the Moffett Road since the early 70s. How come I hadn't seen it? Where was it? It was hard to find. It was hanging out in a warehouse at History, Colorado, as it turned out. It took weeks for them to find it. Once it was found, we were able to put together a program, a plan, where we would have it be put on permanent public display. And that took a lot of money because we had to build a display case and we had to find a place. The obvious place to do it was Denver Union Station, the same place that David Moffett was never allowed to bring his own trains back in his day. And now the trains that go over his tracks are the only ones left at Union Station that go of any distance. And that was the place for him to get the last laugh. So we were able to get it done. And here you see Dana Crawford herself pulling the tarp off of the Moffett Cup, which is now on display all day, every day, for free to anybody who wants to see it at Denver Union Station, right across from the Amtrak ticket desk. And if you haven't seen it, my friends, this is something to see. This is an artifact that is perhaps the most impressive piece of railroad artifacts in the state. Okay, maybe the 4014 up in Wyoming, but this is really good. And we've even had it, it's so prominent that we've had museums and others try to borrow it, take it away and display it in other places. We don't think it should be. We think it should stay right there in Union Station, where thousands of people get to enjoy its beauty on a daily basis. The book did not say the exact numbers, and I tried to find out the exact number. So I hate to say what I don't know, but I can tell you that in 1904 it was in the multiple thousands. I can tell you what the value of the silver itself is in today's market, and that puts it well north of $50,000. The only way that History Colorado would allow us to display it at Union Station is, first of all, to build that magnificent case that we had built specifically for it with climate control on the inside to prevent tarnishing. But also the building itself has to have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week armed guards. And they do. And they did. So we didn't have to add any more security than the box itself. So has anybody not seen this yet at Union Station? I encourage you, go see that. For those of you who have seen it, is it worth taking a look? I couldn't agree with you more. It absolutely is. I still go fishing at the exact same fishing hole, and this is my friend Hugh. And he was having bad luck that day, so I let him pick out my fish. That's Hugh Wilson, and that's right there at milepost 84 on the Moffett Road. That's where I fell in love with trains, right there. There's my father, and that's me. Dad went to be with the Lord back in 2017. I like to say this about the Sheriff's Ranch. To this day, fish still say how they fear him at the Sheriff's Ranch at milepost 84. And he never became the Railfan I did, but he did love trains. And I never became the fisherman he did, but fish still do fear me. One last thing I'd like to say, for anybody who loves anything in this world, you need inspiration. And the very first book that I ever bought, the very first train book, I should say, was Never on Wednesday, about the Rio Grande Zephyr. And Rocky Mountain Railroad Club member Mel Patrick is one of the authors. And this guy here, I think you guys know Dave and Mr. McMillan, and some guy who needs to lose some weight. So don't be afraid of passing on inspiration to others. There's a lot of rail fans that don't know it maybe yet. They just need that spark. That is the official presentation that I have. I've got a lot more stories. I didn't want to overwhelm you with too much because I wanted to have time for question and answer, because I'm pretty sure that each question will lead to a endless explanation by me. So that's that. Absolutely.
He needs us to.
I'm so sorry. Okay. Yeah. So was that too short? Yeah. Yeah. So let's do some good questions. So you know what I've done? I've worked for the BN. I've worked for Amtrak. I've spent a tremendous amount of time with a lot of top executives this last year trying to get the ski train back on track after the COVID debacle shut us down for a while. So I do have some insider information, and if I can share it, I will. But what would you like to talk about? Who's got a question?
Oh, sorry. You mentioned the private car, Virginia City. I assume that's Lucius Beebe's Virginia City.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, that was a true honor to get to be on that platform, shoving that first train into the depot. And I was getting off the tail of the train after coming to a stop, and there was quite a crowd there, and the news media was there, and there were people clapping. And I was so tempted to say what I had prepared, and instead I just said, "It's great to be in Denver. It's great to be back at Union Station." What I thought about saying as I was stepping off that last step is one small step for a conductor, one giant leap for a community that needs rail. I didn't have the courage to be quite that sappy that day, but that was a great day. Yes.
Brian?
By the way, I'm Brian Gould, and I bet I've trained both my entire life too. I got to ride that last one of the Rio Grande Zephyr from Denver to Grand Junction on April 23rd, 1983, and came back the following day and had a super good time on that train. And I rode that Zephyr many, many times in my life. And I'm never going to forget how many times I've been on that Rio Grande Zephyr, because each time I went on, I always find something different. The scenery was just great. I think the dome cars were about the best cars ever, like this right here, the Lucky Road Superdome.
All right.
This is off the Denver Zephyr, city of Denver. Got the E7 here also, which I'm really proud to have, and everything else. And I just like the looks of this thing and everything else about it. And I just wish they would bring the passenger train back to this country like they used to have here, like what Europe has now, because the train is what we need so badly with airline travel like it is now and everything else. I am going to be a passenger train supporter and connoisseur the rest of my life. And I am so glad to meet you and everything else. This is a fun meeting. So I just wanted to say, mention who I am and everything else about me. So I am honored to be here tonight. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gould. It's great to have you here. I'll tell you, those F7s, the 5771 that led the Rio Grande Zephyr, was the perfect aesthetic lead for a passenger train. And the perfect tail was the Silver Sky with the dome observation sleeper at the end. And in fact, there is one thing that we're working on between the museum, the Colorado Railroad Museum, and several organizations are hoping that eventually we can find the old Silver Sky, which we know where it is, buy it, restore it, and display it behind the 5771. Well, well, I'll tell you what, I appreciate that. I agree with you. It is a great idea, and it's something that needs to be done. You know, in Railfan world, there's three things that are going on. There's the preservation of the past, which is absolutely vital. And, you know, we're very lucky in this area. We have some of the greatest rail preservation in the world, with Ed Dickens keeping the steam program up in Wyoming on the UP together, with the Cumbries and Toltec, and with Durango and the Georgetown Loop. Nobody has the preservation that the Colorado area has. We are absolutely blessed. And then the next aspect of railroading is model railroading, and the model railroading like what you've brought. We have some amazing examples of that, especially up in Greeley, where Michelle is running an outstanding museum. And then the modern railroading, which Amtrak is trying to keep up. We're doing our best. The government is benevolently funding us, ridiculously benevolently funding us. And it's our responsibility to make that worth it to the people that are paying the taxes that are making that happen. And that's not a responsibility that we take lightly, certainly not us on the front lines. And I know an awful lot of our leadership, and I know that there's an awful lot of frustration with the reduction in service, with some of the service quality that seems weak, with some of the equipment that seems to be showing far more age than youth. For example, did you guys know that the superliner equipment that we use on the California Zephyr and the Southwest Reef, the very first superliner was built in 1978. Today it's 2022. The original California Zephyr came off of the line in 1949 and started into service. And then that California Zephyr went out of service in 1971. Well, yeah, if you count the Western Pacific cutoff, yes. My point is this: our superliners are twice as old today as the heritage fleet that we inherited in 1971 when Amtrak started. We have got to refleet. And that brings us to the last part of Railfan support, which is the future. Where are we going? What are we going to be? And refleeting the long distance Amtrak system is going to be the question of the 2020s in long distance passenger railroading. Can I tell you what I think it ought to be? It's the bully pulpit. My lovely wife and I purchased an electric car. We got one of them Teslas. And for whatever you think, it is stunning, the technology that can make it possible for that car to function the way it does. I've taken road trips from Denver to South Padre Island in Texas. I've gone to Minneapolis. I've gone to Chicago. Long distance trips on an electric battery car are very possible. I've got to believe that the future can very easily accommodate battery electric plug-in trains without overhead catenary wires that can operate on today's existing rail and that can have Vista Dome cars. Oh, wait, did I say that? The point is this: if we in the railroad industry continue doing what we have done since the 1800s, which is have a carbon belching behemoth hauling boxes on wheels, I fear that our future will be limited, especially as fewer and fewer industries and vehicles consume diesel fuel to operate, because that will put the overwhelming burden of the supply chain of diesel fuel on the few customers left. And if railroading is one of the last places left that's buying diesel fuel, we're going to have to pay for all the exploration, all of the extraction, all of the refining, all of the delivering of the fuel. And the cost will become so prohibitive, and the fuel will become such a boutique item that there's very good chance that it'll be impossible to financially make a case to continue running passenger trains in America after 2030. The semi-truck industry is already moving electric. The automotive industry is rapidly becoming electric. More than 50% of the cars sold in Europe in 2022 could very well be electric cars. The railroad industry can do this, and I believe that we could have electric battery packs that can slide in and out of the undercarriage of passenger train cars so that we can have fast exchange. We can recharge those batteries with renewable sources, and those batteries can take a train 500 miles on a charge, and they can have faster acceleration and far more reliable operation than a diesel engine. I might be wrong, but if we don't try, I won't know. And I think we should at least try, and we should try now. That's my opinion. Yes.
Thank you.
Hello, Jake.
Took the train, the Zephyr, and then the Lakeshore Limited 4 years ago back to the East Coast. My family's back there. And I really enjoyed it all, but for one item, and that was the lack of a diner car on the Lakeshore Limited. The box meals are terrible. They just don't make it. What are the chances we're going to see a diner there? I'm going back in May. I don't think it'll be there in time.
Jake, by May, you're going to be out of luck on the Lakeshore. But I can tell you, and if anybody's ridden the Zephyr in sleeper class lately, you will agree with me. The quality of food coming out of the dining car on the California Zephyr has made a major improvement in the last 6 months, to the point where I actually look forward to getting something to eat there. The problem is that we don't have the capacity because of social distancing to be able to open that up to coach passengers as well. So it's very segregated, and it's only going to sleeping car passengers at this time. We have high hopes that that is going to change as we're able to get a labor pool back in, and as the Department of Transportation allows us to ease up the social distancing. Because right now we can't use every single seat in our dining car room for passengers. So because we've got a limited capacity that we're allowed to stick into that car at a time, we can barely get through our sleeping car passengers. If we can put an end to the pandemic and we can maintain the quality of dining car service on the California Zephyr and open it up to people who would actually pay for it, rather than just have it be a part of the ticket as is the sleeper car, then I think there's a very good chance that as the next couple of years go by, even the Lakeshore, even some of the shorter long distance trains will get dining car service back. We certainly have the equipment to do it. It's simply a matter of finishing off this darn pandemic and then having the will on the upper leadership level to make it happen. That's an excellent question, because when I ride a train, there's nothing I like to do more than eat.
So
the question is, how's the attendance on the Winter Park Express ski train this year? Definitely lighter than we would like. We have 410 seats, and we're pulling in somewhere between half and 3/4. I expect the thing to sell out every single day because I think it's that great a service, and I'm always shocked when it isn't. We're facing a couple of headwinds right now with the Winter Park Express. First of all, we've got the pandemic going on, which just won't end. So a lot of people are still leery of being in a train car full of a whole bunch of people that they don't know. Second, there's been an awful lot of press that has come out and said Amtrak is reducing service. Well, people hear Amtrak and they think ski train, and they hear reduced service, so they think there's no service. So that's hurt. And then the third big thing is there's been an awful lot of negative press about crime at Denver Union Station. And I wish I could tell you that that is not true, that it's a lie, but it isn't. It is true. And we're going to have to find a solution to some of the folks that are hanging out at Union Station who really don't have any business being there other than simply to be there. And if we don't find a problem, if we don't find a solution to that problem, we're going to have a very difficult time selling any kind of train ticket. Yeah. I think the term that we use is they're currently experiencing homelessness. But we need to find a place, and it can't be Union Station Track 5. And so long as it is, every day when I go to the ski train, the first thing I do is sweep it to make sure nobody's broken into it so they could stay warm at night. It's to that point. Bob Brewster, what do you have to say?
What about a west side stop?
That's an excellent question. Bob's question is, what about a west side stop? What he's talking about is the California Zephyr having a place to stop so that everybody on the western side of the Denver metro area doesn't have to backtrack into Denver Union Station in order to catch a train to take them right back west to where they came from. That's a good question. There are people in the state legislature that are working on it. They have talked to some very high level executives at Amtrak to see about the feasibility. And the conversation is now starting to include the Union Pacific Railroad, as I understand it. This is all hearsay. I don't have anything that I could tell you is solid on that, but I can tell you that the discussion has begun. And the wonderful thing about that is that if we had a large free parking area that was safe and it was in the western side of town, suddenly a passenger train going west up into the Colorado Rockies would make a lot more sense for people in Golden and Arvada and Denver and Longmont and all these folks that wouldn't have to go all the way into downtown Denver, hunt for parking, and then face all of the things that you face currently at Denver Union Station. So there's a tremendous amount of value in that idea, which takes us to the next thought about the future of passenger rail in Colorado. We've talked so much about north-south front range rail. I would sure love to see a whole lot more discussion about what I would call, and I think this is another one of Mr. Brewster's ideas, but the Colorado Zephyr, where there would be 3 or so departures a day from Denver and 3 from Grand Junction, and they would run the Moffett Road back and forth. And then from those locations that they stop, which would include Kremling, for example, and Rollinsville, there would be Mustang service that would go north and south like ribs, and the train would be the spine. And Mustang would no longer be a part of the mayhem of congestion on Interstate 70, but rather Mustang would be an accent to the rail line that could take 300 or 400 passengers at a time and get them across the Rockies. It would be slower than a bus, but it'd be faster than a bus in a traffic jam. And it would be far more fuel efficient. We get nearly 500 passenger miles per gallon of diesel fuel in the Rockies on a fully loaded 400 passenger train. Compare that to a couple of people riding in a Chevy Suburban. So there's an awful lot of value in that. And the western stop in Arvada would be the very first piece of putting that plan together. And then, of course, once it's battery electric trains, then we won't be burning any fuel at all. That was the question, right?
Are there spurs where you could pull in the clear for loading passengers or something like that, or would you have to build them?
We would probably simply use the existing stations and possibly build a couple of passing tracks that would include stations at places like Kremling, at Rollins. There's quite a bit of infrastructure added. We'd have to do quite a bit of work to make it happen. But the government, first on the national level and also on the state level, seem very interested in looking for ways to spend money to get people off of rubber tires. And this, I think, would do a tremendous amount to do all of that. Just imagine the branch that would take off from Rollinsville. You would have a bus that would go to Blackhawk and Central City and then down to Idaho Springs. You would also have one that would go north to Nederland and Allens Park and Estes Park. Suddenly, the Rocky Mountain National Park area becomes part of the Amtrak rail system, or the rail system in general. It'd be whatever the Colorado Zephyr would be operated under. From Kremling, you could go north to Steamboat or the other direction towards Silverthorne. So suddenly you get the entire Summit County ski resorts involved. A lot of opportunity to make great use of a piece of infrastructure that currently is only getting about 5 or 6 trains a day. that means that 99% of the time, any piece of rail on the Moffett Road is empty. We can do better.
So, okay. Yeah, William Deal from your less scenic portion. Oh, don't look at me. Anyway, hey, are you involved with the Front Range Rail at all? Has there been any progress on that? I know we talk about that down here, that, we might get tied into Trinidad or La Junta down here with that to have train service to Denver. Do you know anything that's progressing on that?
The question is about what is going on with Front Range Rail. And sadly, I'm not an expert on it. What I can tell you is that the guy who is Jim Suby. And I believe he's the commission chairman now. Anyway, brilliant guy. And that corridor could not be in better hands to weave through the political maze of trying to get a rail corridor started. But Alec, do you have anything to say about that?
Not currently, but yeah, Jim Subi's the right person.
Yeah, I wish I had more information for you. My goal is to take a train from Denver down to Albuquerque someday. And of course, if I do, I want to paint a war bonnet on it.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, where exactly is Sheriff's Ranch at milepost 84? I'm not.
If you're driving on Highway 40, and by the way, don't go bother Ida, please. But if you go on Highway 40 and you go straight west from Granby, right before you cross over the Colorado River, there's a sign that says the Sheriff's Ranch, and they've got about a mile of water, and I have fished that mile of water since I was 4 years old.
Okay. Now I think I know where it's at. Thanks.
Yeah. If you want to go fishing there, we've got to become pretty good friends first. Hugh is a lucky fellow. I'll just tell you that. But yes. There are several that are still working. The question is, are there still California Zephyr dome observation sleeper cars that were restored? The Silver Solarium, and I believe Bert Hermy restored that car beautifully. And yeah, the Silver Crescent is another one that's down at Miami, Florida. There's also one outside of Phoenix, and I can't remember where any of the others are, if they still exist. The Silver Sky is currently sitting rather in derelict condition in Saginaw, Michigan. Saginaw, Michigan. Yeah. The nice thing about it being in Saginaw is, no, there's nothing nice. But that's a good question, because that's part of that preservation. Us rail fans, we need our history, we need what's going on today, and we need to look forward. And that piece of history is absolutely vital. And the fact that some of those dome obs are still running is fantastic. And I'll tell you, one of the best things you can do as a passenger, and I think it's going to, I don't know if COVID has shut it down or not, but the Canadian running with one of those types of cars on the back of it from Vancouver to Toronto is one of the most exciting rail journeys a person can take.
Anybody else online want to ask a question?
Wow. I didn't realize I had no hair back there.
Good thing it's a wide angle.
I know, isn't it? If I could say one thing, then in closing, I think that one of the things that people that love trains do more than anything else is complain about the way things are and be frustrated that things aren't as they ought to be, rather than take great pride and glory in the things that are. Sure, we're always going to look at the things that we haven't done and say, why not, and find a way to do them. But don't underestimate the value of congratulating and thanking people that do things like Michelle running the museum up in Greeley, or the guys up at the Cumbries and Toltec. It's a tremendous amount of work to do the preservation that happens. The Golden Museum. It's labors of love. And when you see folks at these places and you're enjoying them, just let them know you appreciate what they do. And even some of the folks at Amtrak that are struggling to try and keep a daily service on the line with 40-year-old equipment that doesn't work real well, and freight rails that don't really want us around, and management that sometimes seems to be more interested maybe in airplanes than they are in trains. And you see all these things, and it's easy to become depressed, especially if you have to pay the exorbitant prices that we tend to charge on occasion. But at the same time, we still got what we've got. And a lot of places, the passenger rail system's done. It hardly exists. There's some resurgence going on in a few places, but to still have an overnight network of trains crisscrossing an entire continent is becoming a fairly rare thing, and we've still got it. Let's keep that going.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Just want to make the announcement. If you're here and you're not a member, that's yours, yes. And you're not a member, you could talk to Keith here, and we'd be glad to sign you up for about $30 a year, and we will give you a copy of the club history book. That offer only is good if you're actually here in person. We can't make that offer over the web. Also, next month, our presenter will be Doug Junda, who will give us a look at a section of the Colorado Midland. And in April, our friend at the back of the room, Rich Luckin, may do a program for us then. We're still arm wrestling. Also, Nathan, I think you could cut off the recording now. When we're done, if you guys would hang up the chairs on the rack at the back, that's kind of our deal with the church. They'll put the chairs out for us if we'll hang them up. And are we off the air, sir?